Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. In this video, I want to talk about two things. President Nelson's 101st birthday, which is coming in just a couple days on September 9th, and also persecution, because there are two big stories that have come out. Let's start here with Newsroom. At 101, Prophet shares birthday wish and truths for happiness and peace in Time magazine. Just days before President Russell M. Nelson's 101st birthday, Time magazine has published an op-ed authored by the prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And of course, President Nelson posted about this on social media. You can see it right here. And here is the article. There's a little bit I want to read from here, but I want to point out, and I know others have already made this point, that you have this article in Time magazine written by the prophet. And by the way, I don't know why they chose this picture because it's all dark, but whatever. But we have this positive article that's been written. And then, let's see, let me look at the date here. This was September 5th. And a couple days before that, on September 2nd, you had this article that looked into anti-church influencers, I guess focusing mostly on TikTok, but they're all over the place, of course. And it was just a very disrespectful article. I'm not going to pay to read the whole thing. I know others have covered it, but it was just horrible. They showed a picture of somebody wearing temple clothing outside of the temple. And I guess that's to be expected as the church gets bigger, but it was just very, very disrespectful and without taste. But it's so interesting, the timing of these two articles. I don't know if they knew that President Nelson was going to come out with an article on for Time magazine, or if this is it just happened to be. And of course, nothing is ever just coincidence, I don't think. But I'm curious if one knew of the other or not. But we're going to talk about persecution in just a minute. But first, let's go here to Time magazine. Russell M. Nelson, we all deserve dignity and respect. I'm going to skip down here because there's a couple things I think just really stood out to me when he's talking to a really broad audience outside of the church. Love your neighbor and treat them with compassion and respect. A century of experience has taught me this with certainty. Anger never persuades, hostility never heals, and contention never leads to lasting solutions. Too much of today's public discourse, especially online, fosters enmity instead of empathy. And by the way, I didn't check, but I'm pretty sure that this is an excerpt from his talk called Peacemakers Needed. It was his main talk of a recent general conference, I think just a couple of years ago. Imagine how different our world could be if more of us were peacemakers, building bridges of understanding rather than walls of prejudice, especially with those who may see the world differently than we do. I have seen bitter divisions soften when neighbors chose to listen to one another with respect rather than suspicion. Even small acts like reaching out across lines of faith, culture, or politics can open doors to healing. There is power in affording others the human dignity that all of God's children deserve. I want to pause right here and just say really quick, now that I live in Independence, Missouri, and I'm taking all these videos and creating all this content where it's mostly focused on our own church, but I'm also interested in these splinter groups like Community of Christ, the restoration branches that broke away from Community of Christ. So I come across a lot of that here in Missouri, and I would like to encourage everybody to be careful with the way that you comment, because there's a lot of hostility, unfortunately, from my audience toward these other groups. And we should be peacemakers. We don't have to agree with them. I don't agree with them. I don't accept their doctrine, but I do like to build bridges and see what we have in common. And we should really, really avoid calling names. A lot of people do that when it comes to things like the Community of Christ Temple. There's all sorts of nicknames, and I feel like it's just as disrespectful as this right here. This is aimed at us, but we should not be doing the aiming at anybody else. So please refrain from that when I make that kind of content, whether it has to do with the splinter groups or whether I'm doing a video about Jews, because unfortunately some of you feel like it's appropriate to disparage Jews whenever I'm talking about that. Let's try and be disciples of Jesus Christ. I'm not perfect, but I try the best that I can, and I hope that comes across as I make these videos. Okay, next, I have this highlighted in a different color. This is a different topic. I feel like this is somewhat of a warning. It stuck out to me because I recently made a video about this upcoming, well, now it's out, I guess, the September Liahona that commemorates the 30th anniversary of the Proclamation on the Family. They came out with 3 articles in this issue of the Liahona, and they were just filled with warnings related to the family. So President Nelson says, this work begins at home. At a time when loneliness and isolation are rising around the world, families, though never perfect, remain one of life's strongest sources of stability and meaning. My own experience has taught me that fidelity, forgiveness, and faithfulness within families yield deep, enduring peace. Strong families help us extend kindness outward, reinforcing communities and societies as well. So in other words, the opposite of that, not having strong families, it does not reinforce, it actually degrades communities and societies. So I think that this is really interesting. He talks about Jesus Christ right here in the teachings of Christ. So we have this, and then a couple days before, we have this from the Wall Street Journal. I can't believe that they published this. Not that they didn't, I mean, it's fine for them to talk about it, but they were just really disrespectful toward our church. And again, they shouldn't have published that picture. No one should do that against any other faith or belief where you have something that's sensitive, in our case, the temple clothing, and people know that it's sensitive and it's private and it's sacred. You shouldn't cross that line, but they decided to do that. It's okay. Maybe they don't have a very good understanding of the church. People make mistakes. But there definitely are people out there that do know what they're doing. And I guess that's a segue into this next section, talking about the quote unquote Exmo influencers. Okay, so the other day, I went out on like a daddy-daughter day with my 2 teenage girls, and we got ice cream, and we were driving around downtown Kansas City, and I saw this at the convention center. They had an advertisement for the Book of Mormon musical. It came out back in 2011. Let me just read this post that I put on Facebook and Instagram. The Book of Mormon musical is playing in Kansas City. I remember when it first came out in 2011. I was actually a part, typo. It was actually a part of what made up the Mormon moment, which brought a lot of attention to the church. This week, a lot of people have been upset by the recent Wall Street Journal article that was disrespectful toward the church. Instead of getting angry, remember Doctrine and Covenants 109, verses 25 to 26. And you'll remember that section 109 is the dedicatory prayer for the Kirtland Temple. Verse 25, that no weapon formed against them shall prosper, that he who diggeth a pit for them shall fall into the same himself. 26, that no combination of wickedness shall have power to rise up and prevail over thy people, upon whom thy name shall be put in this house. And then I continue. Even though the article was negative, more people will discover the church because of it. Those who are honest in heart will probably see through it and may want to know more about the church. So this is the approach that I like to take when these things happen. It's easy to get angry and want to fight back and behave the same way that they do, right? I found a really interesting quote from President Brigham Young. This is in Journal of Discourses, volume 7, page 145, column A. And I think that this is really good. A gentleman said to me not long ago, "You Mormons scare us. You're here in the mountains, and this expedition would not have been sent against you, but you frighten us by taking such big strides. Mormonism is but a few years old, and it has circumscribed the globe and has penetrated into almost every nation under heaven and bears down in a remarkable manner all opposition wherever your people go. It seems to swallow up our religion, political policies, and philosophy. And if we do not stop you, it would appear that you will finally swallow up the world. I replied, if the people will let us alone, we will preach the gospel in peace, civilly, kindly, mildly, and we will teach the people how to obtain that eternal life that is proffered to all. But will they let us alone? No. And you think we take large strides. He rose from his chair, saying, you take 10 or 12 strides at once. While we go creeping along, you're away yonder. And then Brigham Young, well, you kicked us there, and we cannot help going. Here's the key part right here. Every time you kick Mormonism, you kick it upstairs. You never kick it downstairs. The Lord Almighty so orders it. And let me tell you that what our Christian friends are now doing for us makes more for the kingdom of heaven than the elders could in many years preaching. So, you guys, I'm not worried about this. I recently did a video where we were talking about Brigham Young in a dream that he had where he saw Joseph Smith. So this was after Joseph Smith was martyred. But he saw Joseph Smith coming with a big flock of sheep. And I think there were goats too. And they were just like all sorts of sheep. Some were like really good looking sheep, the type that you'd want to buy. Others were very strange and had deformities. And it was just a strange mix of sheep. And of course, it represented the church. And Brigham Young was like, oh, Brother Joseph, you have a really strange flock there. And Joseph Smith smiled and said, just leave it as, or let them go where they want, or like leave it as it is. In other words, like Brigham Young was worried after they came to Salt Lake about people going to California as part of the gold rush. They had made this hard, difficult trek west to Utah, and it was time to settle down and start building everything anew. And people were wanting to go to California. And so Brigham Young was upset about that. But he received this dream where it's like, look, let them go. The people that want to go to California, let them go. You have wheat and tares within the church. Some of the tares are going to want to go. Even some of the wheat may want to go. But the difference is that when they go, those that are true in heart will recognize that it's not for them, that it's not according to God's will, and they'll come back. So just let everybody exercise their agency, and the Lord will use these different mechanisms to help sort things out, that they actually have a purpose. So these anti-church influencers, it's unfortunate. I feel bad for them and for their spiritual welfare, and that essentially if they continue down this path, they're going to lose their exaltation. It's not over yet. They can always change, and I hope that they do. But in the meantime, they're performing this function where they help sort the wheat from the tares, the sheep from the goats, and it's fine. And not only that, but when you bring the church up to a national audience like this, yeah, it's going to harden some hearts, but other people might become curious. They may want to find out more about the church. So Brigham Young said, we just read, that anytime you kick us upstairs. And that's true. Okay, so I've created a new row on my spreadsheet called quotes A through Z. This is row 437 for persecution. And I have a couple scriptures and this quote from Brigham Young. So if you want to refer to this again, just go to my spreadsheet. The link is in the description box of each video. Okay, so now let's talk about growth. Okay, because I feel like all of this is part of growth. Both the positive article, the negative article, President Nelson's 101st birthday. Let's remind ourselves of what President Nelson said on November 1st of 2018. This was his first year as president of the church. This was a social media post, and he says, we're just at the exponential phase of growth, and it will continue. The Lord has said, I will hasten my work in its time. and he makes good on his promises. So since that time, and especially recently, I'm just going to go up to the top here, pay attention to these green cells that say growth. We have had a lot of talk about growth. There has been a lot of growth. In fact, Elder Cook recently said that from May of last year until May of this year, that 12-month period has seen the most or the largest number of convert baptisms in the history of the church. Things are accelerating. I have this from Elder Morgan and Sister Morgan. He was the area president for, I guess, the Kansas City area, or for, well, I don't know what area exactly. I should probably double check on that. But he was over this area, and he talked about how the Kansas City area has seen remarkable growth. That there's these 9 different metrics that the church looks at for growth. And in Kansas City, or the Kansas City area, has hit all 9 of them. You've had these 3 new stakes that were created, and they had a lot to say, not just with convert baptisms, but temple attendance and stuff like that. So there's a lot of growth happening right now. And with President Nelson's 101st birthday, it reminds me of this. This is Elder Stevenson's talk from the October 2024 General Conference, Days Never to be Forgotten. May I be so bold as to suggest that this year we have commenced a decade that may prove to be as momentous as any that has followed that unparalleled founding decade almost 2 centuries ago. Our decade. Let me explain. Between now, 2024, and 2034, we will experience seminal events that will result in extraordinary opportunities to serve, to unite with members and friends, and to introduce the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to more people than ever before. We just witnessed the power of a truly historic moment as we celebrated with tens of millions the 100th birthday of President Russell M. Nelson. Tens of millions. Again, I don't know how large of an audience this is reaching with this Time magazine article and then this Wall Street Journal article, but it's probably a lot. And I'm sure that there's probably going to be other articles written about President Nelson with these national newspapers and media outlets. Continuing, reporting on President Nelson's birthday, Newsweek wrote a headline that read, "World's Oldest Religious Leader Turns 100." They then listed the world's 10 oldest faith leaders, with President Nelson first on a list that included Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama. Let's pause right here. So think about this. As time goes on, we don't know how long President Nelson is going to live. But can you imagine each birthday that goes by and how that's probably going to draw more and more and more attention? Especially if he gets to 102, 103, 4, 5. So this may be one, again, I think the Lord usually hits multiple birds with one stone, but this may be one reason why it seems like his life is being extended, because as the work is hastening, his birthday and his age could be a part of that hastening by bringing the gospel and awareness of the church to more and more and more people as the world watches. Really quick, when we're talking about him and other world leaders, so we all know that Pope Francis, he passed away. And this is kind of in line with this thing that we've observed. It's been a while since we've talked about this, but when President Nelson turned 98, he became the oldest living prophet or apostle of this Latter-day dispensation. Well, the birthday where he hit that milestone, the day before, Queen Elizabeth II passed away. She was the longest reigning British monarch and second longest reigning sovereign worldwide, behind French King Louis XIV. I felt like there was something unusual going on there. President Nelson hit this milestone, a record in the church, and the day before Queen Elizabeth II passes away. So I was like, wow, that seems kind of symbolic, because we know that when Christ comes, he's going to make a full end of nations. There's not going to be nations like we know them now. He's going to be king of the world. And this feels like a symbol of that. Well, there was a whole series of deaths of leaders of different nations and religions and other things, where you had the longest living or longest in office or first or last or notable people that just started passing away around that same time. The first one I know of was Shinzo Abe back in 2022, Japan's longest serving prime minister. He died. And then after that, just a couple months later, Mikhail Gorbachev, the longest living leader of the Soviet Union, which it's doubtful that we're going to have a Soviet Union again, he passed away. And then we have Queen Elizabeth a few weeks later. President Nelson celebrated that birthday. And then I'm not going to read all these, but you have China, Hawaii, you have soccer, the king of soccer. Interestingly, you have Pope Emeritus Benedict the 16th. He was the longest living pope of all time. And here are my sources over here, by the way, in case you want to double check. He was the longest living pope of all time. He passed away on New Year's Eve of 2022. And then a couple weeks later, the longest living nun of all time, Lucille Randon, passed away on January 17th. And so you've had all these things in what I've been keeping my eye on, or what I was keeping my eye on for a long time, was if this is like a series of nations, like these are these large, powerful nations of the earth. And I felt like, well, maybe the last would be the United States. Interestingly, President Jimmy Carter, he was the longest living U.S. president. He turned 100. I can't remember, but I think his birthday is just like a couple weeks after. I think it's actually in October. Yeah, I think it's in October. But just a few weeks after President Nelson's birthday, or he was born a few weeks after President Nelson. They were both born in 1924, just a few weeks apart. And Jimmy Carter, who would represent the United States in this series, he passed away. And so I don't know if this thing is done. I don't even know if this is a thing, but I feel like it is. The only like big one that I can think of that's remaining would be Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the longest serving Israeli prime minister. So that might be something to look at, but I feel like if there's anyone that could or would top this list, it would probably be him. So, let's go back here. Just looking at the age of all these world leaders and faith leaders, and I guess we'll have to keep our eye on the Dalai Lama, but it seems like the overall message here is that the church is going to continue. That Christ's kingdom is going to continue on into the millennium. At that point, he's going to establish his political kingdom. And it doesn't have an end like these nations of the world, which are just temporary. Continuing, this statement from a New York Times article represents the spirit of much of the international coverage. Quote, in a United States presidential election cycle that has prompted soul searching about aging and leadership, that's interesting, Mr. Nelson's milestone suggests that, at least in his church, a triple-digit birthday does not merit much hand-wringing. He remains a popular figure among church members who view their president not just as an executive, but as a prophet, seer, and revelator, end quote. How grateful we are that President Nelson's landmark birthday gave us an opportunity to introduce a global audience to a prophet of God, a celebration never to be forgotten. It's just going to happen year after year. We don't know when he's going to pass away, but every time he has a birthday going forward, it's probably going to make big news. So this is exciting. And I think I actually want to end it right there. I was going to say something else, but I think I'm going to end it there. So don't stress about these things. See the silver lining in it. There's a separation going on. They're fulfilling their function. And on top of that, they're actually helping us. They're helping to kick us upstairs. So in some ways, it's actually a good thing. But that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.